Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or whatever time you have taken the time to listen to us. And we are the Level Set. Happy to be back. And I am joined here by the Mike Jones, Dr. Charles Alexander. And from what I'm told, as George Clinton, like George Clinton said in Chocolate City, from what I'm told, uh, Gerald T. Christmas will be joining us
Okay.
soon. I am Attorney Larry Fields, and this is our first show post-election. We took some time, in the words of Rakim, to give you some time to get the last one straight. We are, going to, talk about things, and now that a lot of the dust has settled, we can see clearly as to what happened. And we're going to deal with the effects of dealing with this post-election. We are not going to belabor the point. There are opportunities that are existing in light of every environment, and we need to seize those opportunities and move our community forward. So I am going to yield right away, and we will get an analysis. You will not hear a finer political mind this year. Dr. Alexander, good morning. Mike Jones, good morning. Mike, whenever you're ready, please let us know what we're dealing with.
Yeah, I appreciate that compliment about a finer political mind this year, and it's only about 20 days left in the year, so
I'm talking the
I
whole 365.
I'm just messing with
Whole
you, man.
365.
I'm just messing with you. Uh, I'm gonna make this real quick. If people want to know what happened, white folks happened. White Americans, white Americans.
You're breaking up, Mike.
It ain't really
I've noticed
that.
that these streaming systems, when the truth has been uttered,
Okay.
have been breaking up a whole lot. It's not you. I think that the algorithm has been set to quell this. We are already experiencing the censorship that we anticipate. So if you could go back and restate
Yeah, I
that.
think you're right. Let me start that again. I said there's a simple answer to the question of what happened on November 5th, and it is white Americans happened. They were white Americans again. This has nothing to do with Kamala Harris's execution of her campaign, because that was, relatively speaking, flawless. But here's what I mean. Every candidate, every campaign, just like every business activity or whatever you're doing, makes a strategic assumption about something, that this has to be true in order for us to go forward and have a chance at success. And the strategic assumption that the Harris campaign made, which was not unreasonable, that as a result of Dobbs v. Jackson and the aftermath, that white women would be politically in play. Okay, uh, the majority of white people, regardless of their gender, have voted for Republicans every election since 1968. But you had reason to believe in the 2 year aftermath after Dobbs that white women would now be in play, especially when you realize that 1 in 3 pregnancies ends in a miscarriage. I'm gonna say that again. 1 in 3 pregnancies in America ends in a miscarriage. So by definition, if you're pregnant, if you're a woman who's pregnant, there's a 33% chance that you will need some procedure that resembles what we call an abortion. So, and the vast majority of these procedures are not performed because somebody doesn't want to have a baby. They're performed as a result of the body, the woman's body rejecting the pregnancy. Okay. And not to go through these procedures actually puts every woman's life at risk. So you would think, with that in mind, uh, that white women would think a little differently about this election. Uh, and we let our hope overcome our experience because there's never been a time where the majority of white Americans, when push comes to shove, existentially, will always choose being white. And I'll give you another example. Mass shooting. The majority of, the overwhelming majority, really, of the mass shootings in America have had white victims. I'm talking about the ones with assault weapons and all of that. And that's from in Colorado to the school in Florida, the babies up in Connecticut, the Las Vegas thing. And over this extended period of time, white people have never done anything about assault weapons, even though they are the major majority victims of these mass shootings. And the reality is Donald Trump spoke to the existential threat that they feel in this moment to their whiteness in America, or the privilege of their whiteness. And as bad as his campaign was, as terrible as he was as a candidate, not to mention as a human being, that's what resonated with them. And Kamala Harris cannot speak to that. And there was no other argument that mattered. So that's what happened to the campaign. And you don't have to turn on television. You don't have to read a newspaper. You don't have to listen to no talking head, no idiot on any of these platforms come up with, it wasn't the economy, stupid. It was white people rallying around being white. And if that took a Donald Trump to secure their privilege, that's where the majority of the white people in America are. Not all white people, but consistently the majority of white people. So that was the race. And if we had assumed that at the beginning, that white women were not going to consider their personal welfare in this moment, we could have all went home in July. We could have let Biden run because it wasn't going to fundamentally matter. Kamala Harris does not have an argument for that. So we may think, and the reason it's important to get down into that is people will tell you that the behavior that they see on working class or average white Americans, the majority of white people, is irrational. They're voting against their interests. My position is there is no such thing as irrational behavior, and I'll let Charles correct me on this. There's no such thing as irrational behavior. There's behavior which you don't understand the basis for. But once you know the predicate of the behavior makes sense. Okay? And it's just not your rationality. So that's what I think happened. And we can chill for a minute because the fight, the game will start January 21st. Okay, and you'll have, and we don't have the dice anymore. Okay, So it don't. So we got to wait for the shooter to come out and catch a point. Okay, to get a point before we can make it any bet. So, and anybody that tells you anything different is either one or two things. He's either lying to you or he's a fool, or he's a liar that thinks you're a fool. But literally, uh, hey, take some time, make yourself happy for a minute, and you'll have enough stuff to deal with come January. And I'm gonna close with this, Larry. There's a great Chinese uh, metaphor, folk tale, joke, whatever, and it's about this old Chinese farmer, and there's in his village there's a major catastrophe that people say, "Oh, what are we gonna do? This is terrible. It's ruined everything." And the old man says, "Maybe." And then a little later, miraculously, everything turns around and the people are excited and they say, "Oh, this is wonderful. Everything is going to be great." And he says, "Maybe." Okay. We're moving into maybe. Okay. And you got to see the hand play out.
That is it. And that is wisdom. That is wisdom. So, I mean, it sounds like, yeah, that sage advice my father used to give me, and I didn't use enough as a father, which was, do what you got to do and then be still.
Right.
I regret not using that more as a father. But yeah, that's
But you're a brother of the book, so I'll use a phrase from there. Basically, stand still and behold. When you got to the sea, Pharaoh's behind you, the Red Sea's in front of you. Stand still and behold your salvation.
that is it. Boy, I tell you. Boy, but I don't know what to say, Mike. That's awesome. Dr. Alexander. I'd hate to have to come behind that man, but I'd be honored to have to come behind that man. But you are top of the pecking order yourself in your field. I want to, from a clinician standpoint, and from just a student of history and business, what you think is best as we look forward to this incoming administration, some of the things and from a mental health standpoint and others that we should be doing, not just now, but all the time.
Good morning. And I don't mind coming behind the great Mike Jones. I know my position and I play my position.
That's
And
it.
so,
Absolutely.
and so, I think first and foremost, we have to do what it is that we do when we convene. We have to level set. And so, first and foremost, he lost by less than 2%. It's 1.6%. So all of this landslide, all of this, this is, you know, this this speaks to the disdain of the public and that it's all a lie. She lost. He had 48% of the vote. She had 46% of the vote, and then it went this, that, or the other. This thing that um, people were fed up with the economy. Set records last Friday and last Monday with spending. So either you got the money or you don't. So if you got the money, you can't set a record on Black Friday, and you can't set a record on Cyber Monday if you ain't got no money. So it wasn't the money. And as Mike said, white folks always been voting the way that white folks vote. We took a calculated risk, and it was wrong, and so we should be able to come back, kind of bounce back from that. She had 50% of everybody other than white women, right? And so we're kind of leaning on this, and they didn't deliver. But that is what it is. And for me, we want to start like where this became a problem. This became a problem 4 years ago when they elected Joe Biden. He the problem. And so she couldn't run away from the, the presidency, the administration that she served in. That's how she got the relative visibility that allowed her to run. And so I think that it makes perfectly good sense that people were upset about the administration point of view relative to Israel, but I think it's pretty dumb not to vote on that if you're going to punish her and the previous administration when the incoming administration is going to do the same and probably worse. And so, you know, you needed to vote this administration in and continue to fight because you ain't going to have no voice with the next administration. And so that was practical error on those folks who either stayed at home because of genocide or, you know, allegedly voted the other side because of genocide. That's just a poor tactical decision. And, you know, to Mike's point about what's rational and irrational, once you kind of know, you know, kind of ideology, you can kind of, you know, you can understand what occurred. Well, pretty simple, ignorant. And so ignorant voters are vulnerable to ignorant people. The messaging works for them. And so if you don't do your own research and you're, you know, constantly caught up in this thing with regard to, you know, the existential threat and this, that, or the other, and you don't know what your own, like you don't have the sense of your own circumstance, and your thoughts about it are totally predicated based on what somebody else is telling you, then that's your own fault, and you get to be victim to that. And so going forward, we have to continue as we do is you know, kind of at the individual level, people gotta do the self-reflection and introspection and look to see what their quality of life is, what are the things that are impacted, and then how they at the micro level can impact positively their day to day. And actually engage and learn and study whatever it is. You know, and I mean it, whatever it is. You know, you're trying to figure out how to get groceries cheaper than coupons. I mean, this thing is not that complicated. And so again, Black Friday and Cyber Monday showing you got money. And so that can't be the issue. I recognize that gas in my neighborhood is higher. It used to be traditionally lower everywhere else. But now we have a casino in our neighborhood. You got to drive by the gas station to get to the casino. So the casino has driven demand. And so they increase the price to take advantage of the increased traffic. Boom. So what do I need to do? I need to get my gas somewhere, right? So these are the things that we have to do at this fundamental level. But we can't continue to be just, you know, frightened, ignorant voters. That part can't stay because we'll get the same result every time.
I would get my gas in Indiana when I went to Cub Foods when I lived in Chicago anyway. They'll know the taxes were too high. But those are all incredible points. As we look forward, because you know, and I know that a lot of the points that you made, Dr. Alexander, a lot of the points that you've already made will help us help our psyche and help our well-being. Um, but as we go into and as we welcome the JT Kwame Gerald Christmas to the level set welcome. Um, eh, as you look at things from a clinician standpoint, Doc, are there, you know, three things you could tell me I should be doing, or one thing that I should be doing to help my knowing that I'm going into uncertainty, possibly hostile territory, And now I'm equipped with, because, right after the election, the number of individuals that I heard talk about an America existing that they didn't know existed. This coming of age of not knowing that America had the ability to elect a rapist, an individual that's behind taking away women's rights, an individual that has 34 felonies, and being shocked, that gambling's going on at Casablanca. Just being shocked that is going on. What do we do with those individuals as they have to level set a reality that they have avoided there, and oftentimes to enjoy their small little piece of what they would consider the American pie and just totally ignore the masses. But what should we be doing, Doc?
Charles, if you could
Yes, sir.
yield for just a minute, because I'm old enough that I'll forget.
You have carte blanche, Mike. Shoot. You got
Okay,
the green light.
okay. What I think we need to take what Charles said. What we do is level set first. We need to take a little deeper dive since uh, we try to be more reflective and introspective than the average folks just who talk on social media. One of the things we have to account for is the experience, given the demographic changes in America over the last 50 years, what that means for everybody's cognitive sense of reality. And I'll say this, and Gerald has said this regularly about kind of you guys being the first generation who didn't see the civil rights movement, but you were around. The reason you know about it because all of the adults in your life had experienced it. So I'm 75 years old. I got a chance to see that America. I mean, now too little to go to Montgomery. I'm 8 years old. But if you take that period from 54 to the late 60s, literally that's the era I grew up in. So I know who Bull Connor is. You saw the issues in Birmingham. You know who Medgar Evers was in my lifetime. In my lifetime, I experienced that America. More importantly, I was raised, curated by Black adults who had lived in that America their entire life. So I come to America with a whole different context and experience and feeling about America. It is difficult to explain to somebody who never saw that, who never got a chance to talk to a grandparent who lived through it. Because even if you're talking to me, I'm experiencing it so young. So it's really not my totally lived experience, but it is part of my history in this country. You can't explain that to anybody. They don't have the ability. They hear what they understand all the words you said, but it cognitively can't register with them. They have. Do you know how ludicrous and absurd it sounds to say you couldn't go to the bathroom because you were Black? You couldn't sit at a lunch counter because you were Black. You couldn't drink out of the water fountain. You had to ride the back of the bus. If you hadn't seen that shit, you don't think I'm lying, but you just ain't got no place to put that. And also, you've seen Black folks become billionaires. You've seen Oprah Winfrey become the most influential woman in America in terms of popular culture. You've seen athletes like Michael Jordan and Tiger Woods become icons. You've seen O.J. Simpson run through airports before he killed everyone. That's that. You saw Bill Cosby have a show before he gets busted with $400 Coogee sweaters, which was really expensive at the time, and wore a different one every week. That's the America you experience. Okay, you so me talking about a different America. You didn't experience the Vietnam War. You didn't see young black men, 18, 19, 20 years old, go to Vietnam and get their ass shot off about the white folks' imperialism uh, in Vietnam. And you wouldn't understand what I told people when I was in college when they say, "Are you against the war? You're against the war in Vietnam?" I said, "No, I support the war in Vietnam." And they'd be shocked. I say, "I support the wars of national liberation of all oppressed people. I support the Vietnamese right to run America out of there." So but you ain't got no frame of reference for that. You don't understand why Fidel Castro can be a hero to me. Because when the United States was supporting South Africa and the Portuguese and Angola and Mozambique, Fidel Castro was sending weapons, medical doctors, military advisors in their liberation struggle. Now, I know some rich Cubans who had to leave might have some problems with Fidel, but I don't have one. I can tell you the story about the first time Fidel Castro came to America to speak at the United Nations. He stayed at the Teresa Hotel in Harlem. He didn't stay in Times Square. He stayed in Harlem. Okay. He had something. That's why Nelson Mandela, when he got free, he came to the United States, and his next stop was Havana, Cuba. But you ain't got no context for that unless you live a certain experience. And I can't tell you that. Now, for some brothers who are intellectually with the political predisposition that you have, you can absorb it. But for the average person just trying to get through the day, none of that shit it sounds absurd and crazy.
And the thing
when
about
they looking at this other stuff,
uh-huh.
and that's who we got here now.
Uh-huh. And Mike, the only thing I would add is that our generation is like that.
Right.
It's not just beneath us. Our entire generation is like that. I mean, we've got folks that will claim to this day that they laissez-faire capitalists and don't know what the hell they're talking about.
Right.
Doctor,
And then I think on the other end, Mike.
hold on, Kwame. Hold on. We are going to congratulate you on your incredible work. He just finished a trial in Orlando. Young man was wrongfully killed on a ride at an amusement park, and Gerald and his team went down there and spread the pain. They spread the pain, and that family now, I'll let you talk about that to the extent that you want to, but I just want to say congratulations, Gerald.
Thank you. I want to say, let me speak on this one issue with Mike, like before I forget, is that just like he says he'll forget, I'll forget also. Trump is on the other end of that spectrum that you just mentioned because he did grow up in that time period, but he grew up white in that time period. So when he is saying make America great again, he's being nostalgic, remembering all the privileges that they had as white people growing up and what he feels they have lost in this now world that my generation knows. And I just think that's what's so interesting about this, how you looking at it, the history from one perspective, and he's looking at it from a totally different perspective and coming into the White House. And it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, how his perspective plays out with leadership and with Black people in this country, based on his experience with Black people growing up in that same time period. To the case, um, we had a young man, Tyree Simpson, who from St. Louis went to Orlando, Florida to get on a ride. There was a sky drop that took you 100 feet in the air and then dropped you down. And of course, that ride had weight limitations of people who could be on that ride. And that ride was also manufactured by a Australian company called Funtime. And initially, um, Tyree got on the ride. The ride was manipulated to allow him to get on because his weight class was not supposed to be on the ride. And he went up on the ride. And what the ride does is it takes you up this 150 feet and then it leans forward and it holds you there for a minute and then it drops. It did not have a seat belt built into the manufacturer. It only had the harness that goes over you. And that had been manipulated to allow him to get on the ride because of his weight. So when the ride began to come down, he slipped out of the ride and then he just fell to the ground where he later died. And all the other defendants in this case had reached a settlement. And Funtime initially was part of the investigation. They sent their lawyers. They were involved in the process. And then they made a calculated decision that they would just pull out and not take any liability because they felt they were an Australian company and we would never be able to collect any judgment against them. And that's part of where will be at, I'll explain. But what we had to do was have a trial against Funtime in Orlando. And this was Ben's case. Actually, the family, Larry, went to Ben and hired him, the father. The father hired Ben to represent him, and the mother hired another firm down in Florida to represent her. And Ben called me and asked me to be the local counsel on it. And because they needed someone on the ground
JP, can you say who Ben is for our audience?
say that again.
Can you clarify who Ben is for our audience?
Oh, Ben Crump. I'm sorry. Ben Crump.
That was for the white folks in the back. Okay.
Yeah. Yarnell Sampson, the father, had hired Ben Crump to represent him. And then Ben brought me in as local counsel to maintain constant, contact with him and, travel back and forth to Orlando and be able to explain stuff of what's going on. And we had the trial this past Thursday down in Orlando, and civil trial and Funtime elected not to even appear. So we got what's called a default judgment against them because they failed to appear. But we asked the jury to award 100 million to the family, to both parents. There was 50 million apiece. And what the jury did is they came back with 310 million for the family, being 155 million a piece. So we have the judgment, but the issue now will be being able to execute on that judgment. And we do have attorneys in Australia that'll be working with us, but that will be the challenge now, is dealing with trying to execute on that judgment. But it was a good judgment. It was a good day. And, hopefully we will ultimately get some justice out of that.
That's awesome work.
Mhm.
I don't care how you carve it up. I'm sure you will. Dr. Alexander, before you leave us, you have any comment? I guess.
The very case that girl is listed, that speaks to the continuity of our problem. We have, corporate injustice, around the world that impacts us. We get back to your Donald Trump and all of the stuff we say he's heinous. Thomas Jefferson was a rapist. The Kennedys were date rapists. Johnson had a black woman that was his sidekick. Nixon committed crimes against the country. Ronald Reagan was an about racist and started his campaign in Money, Mississippi.
Philadelphia.
Right near the ground of where they found the three slain civil rights workers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this thing don't stop. And so, the police kill 1,000 unarmed people every year and have done so since we've been paying attention. This is the nature of the thing. And so if you can't right yourself in that space, that in and of itself is a mental health issue. And it starts with being able to level things. We got to manage the ignorance and the denial.
Well, thank you, Dr. Alexander. Those are words that should resonate with us all and allow those words to get big in the space because
Larry,
that is it. Yes, sir.
yeah, what Charles just said, also triggered something that I made a note about. I think that we're also in the moment, given where we could be headed one way or the other, and given the lack of historical context and experience that the overwhelming majority of Black people in America now have. They have become Americanized in ways that their ancestors and forefathers and mothers could not. Okay, America would not have permitted that, but capitalism is a hell of a drug, and so the integration and the desegregation of America has nothing to do with enlightenment about race. It just has to do with the commodification of people and the need for further expansion and economic consolidation. Because basically capitalism, Edward Elway, the environmental activist, had a great description of capitalism. He said, capitalism is growth for growth's sake. And growth for growth's sake is the etiology of a cancer cell. So ultimately, it absorbs and assumes. And the reality is we need to figure out a way to have a kind of internal conversation to really withdraw from America at the emotional, intellectual level to say, who are we? Why are we? And what do we want to do about being here? And for me, and I don't know how it happened, but you could argue the impetus of the civil rights movement at its inception was to desegregate America, to stop it from being illegal to bar us from public space. Somehow that got twisted into integration, and that whole notion of integration has an underlying premise of the inferiority of anything Black. So we abandon ourselves to be absorbed into a system that doesn't want us. And the advantage our forefathers, ancestors had is that was never their issue. Matter of fact, I think the value that I have is a function of being raised in an all-black community. Now, I've lived integrated adult life, but my foundational stuff comes from the fact that I didn't go into the world until I had been properly immunized in an all-black community. And I would argue, even though, some years separate us, about 12, 15, you guys also came up the same way with parents who had experienced that other America and prepared you for that. Now, so many of us abandoned that, and then we raise children who actually think they're Americans, like they are Americans. And there's a legitimate question about two legitimate questions. One, will we ever be Americans like white Americans? First question. And the second question is, do we want to be like white Americans? I wouldn't give up none of my black self to be nothing white in America. Categorically, I can tell you that right now. I raised my kids the same way, and it looks like they raised their kids the same way. So we have some really serious internal philosophical existential discussions we need to have. It's why our political leadership looks so disjointed, because we no longer have a common identity that historically we always had. Even when black leadership fought about tactical stuff, okay? And they did. There's never been a time when you had unanimity of opinion in black leadership. But you did have a consensus that they were black leadership. It wasn't trying to be white leadership. Wasn't nobody trying to be the president of the United States. Because the president of the United States comes at being at the expense of your blackness. And which is why, and I'm talking about your American blackness, and that's something Obama and Harris don't have. They are the first generation children of an immigrant and a white woman. So how they internalize being black in America is totally different than the way I internalize it. And our problem is so many of us who are the descendants of the African diaspora internalize America the way Obama and Harris did. And that ain't your black experience. And it's never going to be your black experience as long as white people in America are who they are.
What Mike is speaking to is psychological misorientation. And so our point of reference is strained from a black conscience. So we have black skin, so we're external, but our ethos, our soul, our consciousness, our spiritual point of view is weakening under this perpetual continual onslaught. And that's what we have to come back. I mean, we're in a place right now where you could go sit down and listen to a Negro, probably a Negro in Congress, listen to a Negro in Congress, still rant and rave about what he perceives to be the foolishness of Marcus Garvey in Africa for the Africans, yet send the U.S. resources and take money from AIPAC for Israel for the Jews. That's what we're looking at right now. And that's detrimental to well-being of all blacks.
Charles, I thank you, man. I didn't know. I didn't know it had a name for what I was saying, but thanks. I appreciate that.
Well, I mean, since you brought them up, Dr. Alexander, I'm going to recommend that everyone go back and revisit uh, Message to the People from Marcus Garvey. That's a good place, and this is a staple. I think that if we really consumed what Amos Wilson was speaking about, Mike, it gets directly at what you were talking about in terms of being a nation inside of a nation. This total assimilation that we have is, I mean, we're the only ones that do it. And we are, for some reason, and I think it's spiritual in part, we continue to be the ire of this, of the power structure in the United States, all the attacks. What in the world would make you get out of bed and go and attack um, the few spots that black folks have in these, actually the few allocated, I won't even say allocated spots, but the few opportunities blacks have to get in these quote unquote Ivy League schools. Why in the world would you attack black women that want to help other black women in business and use the justice system as and weaponize it against them? Why in the world would you attack any sort of economic law that does nothing but level the playing field for black folks? There's a reason for that, and there's a reason why we need to establish some form of distance between us, that system, and those individuals. And another book I'm going to recommend is that we go back and we read Dr. Alexander, The Colored Conventions Movement. Everything that we need has already been laid out hundreds of years ago. And we've got to toughen up. We've got to smarten up. This notion that you are going to envelope yourselves into this system has, we've tried that. And this is as far as we're going to get, I think, with that. But self-actualization and self-reliance is where we need to be. Charles Hamilton Houston was 100% correct. You do not get to hog all the good stuff. So, I mean, there needs to be parallel tracks. You're not going to deny me from going where my money can allow me to go and go and live. But there is something that we need to establish in terms of an economic center, a social center, a culture center that we establish and protect for ourselves.
But Larry, that requires us to have a conversation. What is it that Kierkegaard's famous little thing? Who am I? How did I get here? What's this thing called the world? And who is why was I not consulted? And who is the director? I want to speak to him. That's, I mean, going back to the essence of that question, man. And we are as casual and as lazy intellectually. For me, here's what I think of the American character. I think Americans are the most intellectually lazy, sloppiest people in the advanced world. Okay, that you can go all over this planet, and I'm not talking about to developing countries that are struggling with infrastructure. We're talking about the more advanced industrial countries. Literally, you will not find a upper middle class, and I'm not talking about the poor people of those countries or the poor people of this country. The ignorance, and that was Charles's word, that's different than stupid. The ignorance and the lack of historical awareness and any intellectual depth on the average American upper middle class professional is profound. And
It's
even
profound. I, I
and
like I like your term actively ignorance is a term that
right,
you've used on this show before.
that is what we are up against. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think you're up against the active ignorance, and you're also up with the lack of desire or action to do anything. I hear what everyone is saying, but right now in our community, individuals that who are capable of taking action and bringing some of these issues to fruition about having a discussion, they have no interest in this because as you say, Mike, they have assimilated so into the American culture, and I'm talking about Black people, that they feel like they have something to lose. So they are not trying to, they don't have the same instincts as a Marcus Garvey or a W.B. Du Bois because of the different worlds that we've come up in and the way that we have assimilated in the culture. They don't want to fight it that same way because they feel like they are American and they feel like if they get into this black fight that they are going to lose personally. And they don't want to lose personally. And they're not willing to sacrifice personally for the race. We had people then that were willing to sacrifice for the race. They were willing to die. These people are not built like that at all. They really don't want you to cause any problems because they are living fine where they are. The people that they are communicating with, the groups that they belong to, they don't want to lose any of that. And that's where the struggle is. And nor do they want to know about how our people are living, around the world. I just came back from Jamaica. And the one thing I was thinking about when I was in Jamaica, because you see so much of this as you move around the country, the influence that we have. We have such a large influence. I'm talking about Black Americans have such
Right.
a large influence around the world. And it really made me realize that we are really doing a bad job because we are really setting a bad example for Black people all around the world. And we could be doing a whole lot better if we were organized and focused in helping our people all across the world because they look up to us so much and they emulate us so much, but they are emulating the wrong things and we are sending them the wrong message. And we have a major internal problem. Trump and the Republicans and the other white Democrats are a problem for us. But our internal issues are a bigger problem for us that we are refusing to address. Our accountability issues, our responsibility to make our communities safe and decent places to live, our cooperative economics, working together to pull our money. We're just failing in so many ways on so many issues that we have so much potential to do better on. And we are just not challenging ourselves or holding ourselves accountable or holding our entities accountable. We all are just drinking the Kool-Aid. We all just getting high and just keep moving along with it. And, smoking this drug of America and believing that we really are Americans. And you really cannot convince these people now that they are not. We have Black people that solidly you cannot convince that they are not Americans. And I don't know. I feel like this Trump era is divine intervention because we need some pressure. Like my grandmother would always say, a lump of coal doesn't become a diamond without pressure. We need somebody coming in that is really going to take a serious attack at what we think that we are to really make us understand, okay, this is where you really are. This is what you really need to do. Because without that, we won't do it. We will not let, if Kamala had won the election, we would have went on like everything's just fine and kept doing everything else that we were gonna do anyway. It would just go on the way it was going on because her vision of America, as you said, like Obama's vision of America is totally different from ours. And you do have to concede your blackness to be president. We neither one of them would have stood up and just flat. Kamala said, I'm not gonna do anything just for Black people. You understand what I'm saying? And I don't know if it was due this cycle, if it was another election cycle. I have to double check that when she made those statements and they were using it against her. But you do have to concede your blackness in order to be the president. And for the things that we need, we can't have leadership that concedes blackness. We can't have people in Congress that concedes blackness. We have a record number of Congressional Black Caucus members going into the House this year. But what are they going to do? What are they going to stand up for? What stances what bold moves are they going to make? I don't feel confident about that right now. And I think it's only going to happen if we come together, and we really have to start raising hell at the ground level. We have to go back to, what we were taught, how it was put in front of us, and how we need to liberate our people. But we're going to have some brave soldiers who are willing to lay it on the line.
I think.
Well, what we think we're gonna go back to? Kamala and Barack are our age.
Right.
It's not an issue because of who they parents are. This is the thing. But we have to conversation like somehow or another we suffered in the past. Go back to the book that Larry referenced, or the Southern People's Convention, talking about some people in the book. It's a meeting. They're talking about the sellouts then. You go back to David Walker's appeal. He's talking about the sellouts then. We don't always have sellouts, and that's the pressure of this place. We are the others, and so that's the consequence of being the others. And we're not failing; we are underperforming. Those are two different things. And so that too is a part of the leadership, and that's why we can't be all doom and gloom. She lost again by less than 2 percentage points. So we have to right size our fight, and we have to right size our strategies. We have to right size our goals. Now, to your point, Gerald, we might need to ask: does our continual climb require a black president? Right? Is that what it requires? I don't think so, because we've had a continual climb, without a black president. We had one black president. He served for 8 years, and that was not the defining moment of blackness. It was a moment of blackness. And so we just need to clarify those points.
Charles, to your point, I had an idea and a title for a column that I never wrote. And the title and the column was going to be about the rise of black political ambition and the decline of black political power. So I would suggest to you, just as a practicing politician, the last thing I want is a black president, because I ain't got no leverage over him. I need a white guy who couldn't be there without me. So in this business, you're looking for leverage. And there's two things that happen. I can be something at the expense of something else, or I can make you something at your expense to me. And if you're in the game for power,
Mike,
control,
Mike, you need to lengthen that, because that is a theory that we really need to get a hold of and understand that. So if you could repeat that one more time.
No, I'm saying politics. Here's how I define politics. Politics is the art and science of acquiring and using power to your benefit, whatever that is. And you don't get it based on personal ambition. What you do is you create leverage. You want to be the necessary and sufficient ingredient that somebody can't get to what they want without you. Mm-hmm. So the most powerful person, and Gerald and Larry, you know this, and Charles as a psychologist, but you two as lawyers, the guy that doesn't want anything in it, or doesn't appear to want anything in the negotiation, is always the most powerful person in the room. Once I know what everybody else wants, I know how to play you. I will never try to tell you what I want, because at that point, things get priced out because all of this is transactions, okay?
And
And
that point right there, we need to reiterate. These folks that are working, inside of the beast, this is, I mean, you're not in a family. This
right,
is what, Mike? A transaction. We
right.
got to understand this is transactional.
Look, if you watch the movies, there is only two questions in certain scenes. The first question is, did you bring the dope? The second question is, did you bring the money? Okay, because that's the only reason we're here. Okay, that is the only reason and both of us got to be tough enough. And somebody says, yeah, and he said, you want to count it? He said, no, because both of us have to be tough enough that the cost of double crossing each other is bad for business, our individual business. Our problem is we don't hunt. We don't fire incompetent. Okay. We don't punish people that cross it. To me, one of the most existential moments in any movie or television series you'll ever see is the conversation between Avon and Stringer about their business. And Stringer is explaining to Avon, this is what we can do now. We ain't got to be ripping and running in the streets. We got this. We can be the bank. We can put it here. By the time the federals come and say, we legit, they can't touch this. Boom, all of that. And Avon is listening to him, and he says, String, I said, but I'm not a suit wearing businessman like you. I'm just a gangster, I suppose, and I want my corner.
I want my
And the difference in those two men in that moment is Stringer Bell was talking about the business. Avon was talking about who he was. And he wasn't going to give up who he was to make more money. And that he makes money this way because this is who I am. The money don't make me, I make the money. The job don't make me, I make the job. I'm supposed to be the same cat. Wherever you put me, I'm going to be the same guy. And fundamentally, we used to be built that way, but you can't send kids to integrated school and expect Black teachers in an integrated school, or damn sure you can't expect white teachers to raise Black children. They go raise white children.
And that's the expectation we have now, because the overwhelming number of our children are being taught by white women. Right. And that's what's problematic. And that's some of the problems that we having right here, locally in our own home district, Larry, University City, because we have a Black district, but overwhelmingly these kids are being taught by white teachers.
Gerald, here's this fact. The thing a child does most during the ages of 6 to 18, the activity that he spends the most time doing is sleep. Okay? You know what activity he spends the second most time doing? Going to school.
Mm-hmm.
You spend more time at school between the ages of 6 and 18, all your formative years, your entire adolescence, going into the beginning of adulthood. You'll spend more time at school than you'll spend with your parents, with your siblings, which is that fundamental.
Fundamentally.
You are being shaped every day by that experience. The only thing you will do more, spend more time doing than going to school, is sleep.
And I think that's one of the reasons why, our children are so off right now, is because of unfortunately, is because of the time that they spend in school and how they're spending it and who they're interacting with. and the influences that they're getting. Because you think about, Mike, and you talk about you growing up, in your Black community, and even I think with us, Larry, growing up, coming up through the school system, it was still Blacker than what it is
Right.
right now. And there was still a bigger Blacker male presence back then than than it is right now. And those are some of the things, though, we have to start coming together at a local level and having more positive action, because we're just not having action. And we have to have more positive action toward addressing these issues and putting pressure, using our leverage politically to get some of these things done at a local level, because politics is all local, Mike. What happens at the local level is going to affect you 100% quicker than what anything that Trump or the DOJ can do at the national level. And we're just not understanding that. As I'm not saying we're not understanding it, but we're not moving as a community to what's going to be best in advancing us as a Black community, because we have lost, like you said, we have lost that cohesiveness in understanding who we are, because we bought so much into Americanism. And that becomes the issue. How do we separate from Americanism back to being Black?
And a lot of it is we've been indoctrinated everywhere.
Everywhere.
How many, I want to know how many people felt uncomfortable when I showed the title of this book, Black Power, because we've been taught not to want power, because as Christians, we should not, we should not assert that,
Mhm.
we should just be the actual victims of circumstance and benevolency. How many people felt uncomfortable there? Then the other issue is, Gerald, and Mike, it doesn't matter who's teaching you. If in fact my curriculum is teaching you how to solve the problems of white folks, we still gonna have the same issue.
Yeah,
Right.
There's not
exactly.
a curriculum out there.
That's an excellent point.
I have not seen a curriculum that put that equips students to solve the problems of the Black community. I haven't seen one. And since I left Moore, that was the last time I've heard anyone say these are the things we need to do for our community when I left Morehouse. I have not, I mean, and I have raised four children, and not one of those curriculums suggest how, the nuances, number one, in Black students. And number two, now when my son went to an all male school, they focused on how to teach young boys. That was the focus. But I've never seen anyone focus on number one, Black history and how to teach, Black children specifically, meeting their needs. They'll rearrange the chairs of the deck of the Titanic, when the heat gets turned up. But that's not it. And I certainly have not heard anyone suggest anything on how to solve the needs of the Black community.
Larry, I would suggest we ought to quit using the term Black history.
It's
We ought to talk about American history and world history from a Black perspective, because history is an objective thing. Your understanding of it is a function of where you are in it, and you need to understand these events from your perspective, which can be totally different than somebody else's perspective. And we don't have to have an argument about our perspectives, because I got mine, you got yours. But we may have an argument about what happened or didn't happen, but how I feel about it, how you feel about it. Those are the things that our circumstances historically required us to do. I mean, I don't know if we were overly insightful and enlightened. It was just a Black adults leadership, whatever term of art you want to use, just understanding what they had to do, what you had to know in order to survive being Black in America.
And Mike, in addition to that, I don't even know if we can call it history because it's still prevalent right now. You watch tape,
Right.
so you know how to
That's
play the game
it.
now.
Right. Yeah.
So I mean, it's really um, precedent. We are
Right.
watching precedent. So
Right.
go back and studying precedent so we know which way things are more likely to occur tomorrow. But I
Uh,
mean, all we're doing is reading tape.
That, Larry, that's the best way to put it. You're watching the tape because so you'll know what they like to do when you get to the game.
And what your team has done in the past, what's worked and what has not worked.
And what
Right.
did not work right. And the tape don't lie.
The tape predict the outcomes that we just had, did
Yep.
the tape predict the outcomes because you read the tape and you predicted the outcome before it happened, didn't you? I
Well,
mean,
I said, I said, I said,
you told us that we weren't even on the field.
yeah,
The only people that could say the game
white women.
well, that's right. You said those are the people that were going to say the game, and their defense folded.
Right.
They got pregnated. Their defense got pregnant. So yeah. So Gerald, you have any more comments on that?
I think that, we were talking earlier about Trump coming into office and what we need to be prepared for. Just from a legal perspective, looking at what their ability may be and how we need to go back and look at that tape and figure out, moving forward, when January arrives, some of the issues we have to deal with. We know that the last time that Trump was in office, he loaded the Supreme Court. There's a real possibility that he'll have an opportunity to appoint more justices in this term. I would believe that they may even force some people to step down in order to get some appointments in this term. So we could also see the court, being more conservative and definitely having more conservative decisions that relate to us and our issues. At one point, we were talking about expansion of the court. I don't know if we would have an expansion of the court under, a Trump administration. A lot of people have said that, expansion of the court is needed so that we don't have so much power invested in just so few people. It would make it more just to expand the court, and the court has been expanded before, but I don't think it's going to come under this administration. The Justice Department. We know that the Justice Department can be weaponized, and it's going to be interesting to see what Kash Patel does. If he's going to be heading the Justice Department. Prior to that, he was a senior advisor to Trump, and also, senior director over those international missions with breaking down various international entities,
Yeah.
counterterrorism. So we know that's what his experience is.
Yeah. If I may,
So it'll be interesting to see. Go ahead.
To what Larry just asked you, I want to tie this together. The Justice Department was always politicized. Who do you think J. Edgar Hoover was?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
what did Richard Nixon do? So this ain't no new thing.
It's not.
Okay, and it's because we hadn't looked at the film.
Right.
We're being shocked. This has happened before.
Right.
And the most reactionary part of American federal government. The federal government, the most reactionary institution in the entire history of the United States, has been the Supreme Court. If you take the body of work for the Supreme Court outside of the Warren Court, about 15 years out of 250, you had some quote progressive jurisprudence. Other than that, the Supreme Court and the federal judiciary has always been a status quo reactionary institution. And so that's the way we need to talk about it. Don't talk about it like, this is once more into the breach, dear friends. Okay, this ain't some new shit. We're going back to where it all started again, but because that's been our experience. So, and Larry, here's what I wish Black theologians, I wish Black preachers would be theologians for a change and use this Black people are fundamentally Christian and they're familiar with the New and Old Testament, but we don't explain what they know in ways that they can use. And I'll give you just 2 examples. And I'm going to tie them together. We'll hear people say, well, you got to turn the other cheek. You got to forgive and turn the other cheek. That's not what that scripture says.
Not at all.
It says, if your brother offends you,
Right.
turn and offer him the other cheek. You don't say everybody.
Not at all.
It say your brother. And now I'm going to explain, and I ain't a preacher, but now I'm going to explain who your brother. He said your brother is. He's talking, and somebody comes up to him and says, Jesus, your mama and your brothers are outside. They need to get in to talk to you. And what does he say? Who is my brother? Now they're talking about his family.
Mm-hmm.
He said, but my brother is he who believes what I believe to do the work of my Father like I do the work. Now, how come a preacher can't explain that shit to somebody in everyday language so they can get away from this nickel dime superstitious bullshit and be given some spiritual direction and have a point of reference that they can use in their life?
But our preachers don't want to be revolutionary like that, Mike. That's real problematic, and the crux of the issue, with the church right now is that they do not want to be revolutionary like that. They do not want to take those stances. They're comfortable in their positions, and capitalism has really made its way into the church.
It's always been in the church. I mean, when Jesus ran the money counters out, that was the issue then.
Mhm.
And it is stayed, and we are not attracting the minds like Kwame Christmas to the pulpit. We've got guys, man, that the pulpit is the last bastion for scoundrels,
Mhm.
and just like we got entrepreneur politicians,
We
we
got
got
entrepreneur preachers.
man, oh man, and
Yeah,
Matt.
I think that they should go back to being part-time, not full-time.
Right?
Back when preachers they had a regular job and then they just preached on Sunday.
Yeah, that's back when the NBA players were working that's way
Yeah,
back. That's back when they were selling insurance on the side.
the reason I said Dave Bing and them all was successful in business because they had to figure out what they was going to do with the rest of their life, man. They didn't make
Right.
enough money playing basketball not to have a job.
No, like Robin Harris told them, we driving now, baby.
But I also think too, I'm changing the subject a little bit, but what I want to get this in also is that Biden is not out of office yet. We know he pardoned his son, but we need to put pressure on him and the other Democrats as best we can because there are a lot of working class Black people in federal prison that need to be pardoned too for nonviolent offenses, for drug offenses. We need to really, this is an opportunity, I believe, to push for some type of blanket pardon for our people because we have way too many people confined in the federal system that can be pardoned, and he on his way out anyway. You understand what I'm saying? We need to use some leverage because as Mike said, because Um, you know, the party wants us, they need us, but we got to use some leverage, and we need to get our people pardoned before they leave that White House.
Most definitely.
You know, people are
And
making suggestions about high level people being pardoned, like Marilyn Mosby. I don't have a problem with a pardon for her, but Marilyn Mosby is going to be all right. We got a lot of working class people that really need to be pardoned, and we know they need to be pardoned.
I've been calling Corey's office, and all week there are 5 openings on the local federal bench right here in St. Louis.
And they need to be on top of that. You know, that's
5 openings, and there's only one nominee for it.
okay.
All Trump is going to fill all of those up. In
If
the
they don't fill them before
in the first 13 days,
seven,
it,
first
it,
7 days.
it's ridiculous, man. I
Right.
don't know where you fall asleep at the wheel like that.
I think that's, a part of the reason why she didn't win the election.
Yeah,
Because you can't be asleep at the wheel.
yeah. I mean, that just doesn't
At
make
the
sense.
local level. At the local level.
How in the world? Well, yeah. How did that happen? How did?
Well, here's my sports metaphor for today. I'll start an argument. Kobe Bryant and LeBron James will never be as good of a basketball player as Michael Jordan. Now, they might be better athletically. They could have more talent, even more skill. But he's a better basketball player. And the reason he's a better basketball player, will always be a better basketball player, is the 3 years he spent with Dean Smith. You can't leave high school and go to the NBA, no matter how talented you are, miss that developmental experience, and there's no way to replace it.
Right.
So fundamentally, when I got into this business, when I got into this game, when you talked about somebody's political skill and they were a politician, you were talking about what they could do with the government. It's kind of like how they could play ball, okay? That they understood the game that they was in. You wasn't talking about elections. Getting elected was a prerequisite for being a politician. Now, when we talk about politics, the only thing we talk about is election. And nobody's focused on governing. Don't nobody know how to do it. So in the NBA, everybody can run, jump, and shoot, and they can all. And if you're 7 feet tall, you can all shoot 25 footers. Okay, and there ain't a team in the NBA. No, there's not. I put like that. I won't say ain't a team. There's not a half a dozen teams in the NBA that can actually run a play to get a shot. If they call timeout and broke out the timeout, they don't have a set that they could run to get the shot that they wanted or an option off the shot that they want.
I just watched it with Phoenix earlier this week.
So it's being paid tens of millions of dollars for being a schoolyard basketball player. Because that's what it is. And if you know something, and it's like comparing serious jazz with R&B, and I happen to love R&B, but I would not play what you have to play to be the backup band for the Temptations or Beyonce. Ain't what you got to do if you go play with Miles Davis or John Coltrane or Duke Ellington. And so there's a degree of complexity and stuff, and we think you can skip stuff now, and you can't go back and learn it. See, that's the problem. Once you're in the game, you can't go back and learn. That's why they don't let you take the bar no more without going to law school, okay? Because for 100 years, you could read the book and then take the test.
Or intern with an attorney.
Okay, you can do it that way, right? Now you got to go to school because there's some things you need to know if we go trust you to represent people. So it's this,
But if you
we,
got the discipline, even once you in the game, Mike, don't you think you can go back and learn some stuff if you
wait a
want to
minute,
learn it? If you want
wait a
to
minute,
learn it. The problem
wait a
is
minute.
that they don't want to learn it.
Wait a minute. The issue, reason I use that as the metaphor is those 3 or 4 years in college were a necessary prerequisite to even teach you what you had to learn as a pro.
Right, right.
And what happens is when you miss that part, when you get to be a pro, I now have to dumb down what it means to be a professional because there's too much stuff you don't know.
Right.
Okay, it's too many things you don't understand, don't know how to do. So I got to take something that's very, very complicated. We got to start doing stupid stuff, or relatively mundane stuff, because you don't have the intellectual capacity to absorb what it means to play at the next level. So everybody in Congress spends all their time raising money for a campaign once they get there.
Especially in the House. And, we
Right,
overwhelmingly have all our people in the House.
right.
Mhm.
So
And so,
fundamentally, they don't spend any time
mhm.
in mastering the mechanics of government because they spend, and we call them politicians, and they spend all their time getting elected, not making the government do what it needs to do for you or the people that sent them.
Because they're really professional fundraisers. That's what
Right. That's exactly what they are.
because
Professional
they going
fundraising.
from because
Right.
every time they come out of a cycle, they
Now,
right back to the next.
I'm gonna tell you what they are. They $10 corner hoes and the consultants or the pimps,
Mm-hmm.
and they putting them in the room to get the money
Mm-hmm.
because they don't even keep the money. The money is for the pimp,
Right.
for the
Well, look, we
campaign.
just saw that. That just played out for us in the congressional race here with the first congressional district.
Right.
We saw that right in our face where somebody brought someone in like that and then, supported them and just took the position.
And now here is what's different in politics. 50 years ago, if you had showed up with $18 million, you'd have to put it in a bag. You couldn't have spent it on TV, man.
Right.
Now that's the crazy part of it. You spend $18 million and ain't nobody seen none of it.
None of it. None of it. Nobody in the community. No impact. No impact on the district that you represent.
Well, I put it like this. For 18 million, I'm gonna be a little cynical, but it's kind of true. For 18 million, if I had $18 million, I'd just ask Corey how much she want. We ain't gotta mess this money up, baby.
Right.
Right.
You ain't gonna make 5 or 6 on because I can't give you all of it because I got to keep some of it. So, but I can't. You ain't gonna make $5-6 million doing this stuff. So shit. I mean, wait a minute. You're here. Hey, you want to cash in early, okay?
But
But
from a
no,
positive, from a positive action point of view, Mike, based on your experience, your lifelong experience, growing up in the world that we didn't grow up, and then being an adult in the world that we did grow up in as children, what do we do now from an action standpoint? Because we can have a conversation about what we need to do
I
and what
really.
needs to happen, but what is the challenge or what is the charge that we have to do in order to start, making some movement, some positive movement and moving our community forward?
I think I did a piece a long time ago, and it was based on a conversation I had with Eric Vickers, and we used to talk. And then one day I asked him the question, "Are we still a community?" And the longer I thought about it, the more I had to come to the conclusion that we're not.
Right.
Because, and what made us a community was overt white oppression. That all of the Africans that were forcibly brought here were a disparate group of people. You've been to the continent a couple, 3 times.
Mhm.
And so it's a disparate place.
Right.
The only people talk about Africans or Americans, okay? Just like with you in Europe, you can say Europeans from here, but every country is different. In Africa, it's the same way. So all these people from these different cultures, backgrounds, stuff, got thrown together, stripped of their native identity, and had to recreate an identity that was defined by their oppressor. So for 250 years of slavery and 100 years of Jim Crow, we were forced together, and we had a response to that. We created community out of that oppression. We became this community, but we don't have we don't have a religion, language, major cultural systems or artifacts that are endemic to us as a people. They were all a function of things that we created as a result of our oppression and being thrown together. Post civil rights, public accommodation bills, voting rights, Black people in, let's say, post 1965, Black people started to have what everybody else in the country had. They can make individual decisions about what they wanted without having to consider the group. Now, everybody in America had been able to do that, but us. The way we had to think about it is, here's what I want to do, but what does it mean for us? Because you couldn't separate yourself from us. And over time, those bonds that were never really internally ours, but were a result of our chains of oppression, started to break away, melt away, and we started to go in different directions. And there were those of us who were raised in the old way, kind of like immigrants, okay? Your mom and father came here. You was raised in the immigrant ghetto, whatever it was, the Jewish community, Polish, Italian, didn't make any difference. But by the time you can go to school, get a graduate degree, become 2 lawyers and stuff, you don't live in the same place that your grandmother, that your parents raised. So your kids grow up in a whole different community. And maybe they don't speak Italian or they don't speak Greek, because I can think about European communities that used that you used to know where the community was. Italian community in St. Louis on the Hill. In Detroit, there's Greek town. But as those people stayed here, by the third, and damn sure by the fourth generation, those communities disappear. And that has happened to us, but James Baldwin has an interesting observation. He says to be African American is to be African with no memory and American with no privilege.
Mhm.
And that's what separates us from everybody else. It's what Charles said. We are the other in America, and I don't know what the model is. Short of revolution, I don't know what, and I'm talking about oil struggle revolution, where you're usually the majority fighting against the overthrow of an numerically smaller oppressor. I don't know how you build that solidarity. And even those countries have problems if they win creating the kind of solidarity that you need for you to build a nation. And literally, I think part of what you're seeing in America is white people trying to restore the solidarity of white people that they had when the country was 85% white, and they don't know what it means to be in a country where soon white people be less than 50% of the country now. So I don't even know if it's possible for them to do what they're trying to do, and if it is, it's going to be at the expense of white people, not at the expense of black and or other racial minorities. I mean, we'll take an ass kicking about it, and it'll be brutal for us. But you're gonna have to oppress a lot of white people in order to pull off a more regimented society that's along with a racial caste system. So I don't know, Gerald. That's that existential question that may not have an answer, but it damn sure is above my pay grade.
We haven't had a question that was above your pay grade, Mike Jones. So we will take that as that is one of the foundational questions that we'll be talking about from here on out until we get those answers. Because I think
fundamentally though, we can start challenging our institutions or organizations, on these issues.
But
I would like to see us because
well, the problem with that, though, many of these institutions are feckless because they've been infiltrated. You look at
right,
some of these major civil rights institutions, they're not run by folks that have any sort of alliance or allegiance to the community. They just put those folks they do committee work in subservient situations, but they don't make any sort of decision making. I mean, where has, these organizations been, as we have been just the brunt and victim of mass litigation attacking us over this last 4 years? We haven't heard a peep out of any of these organizations. And we haven't heard a peep out of these organizations because the oligarchs are funding these organizations and they do not want to offend them. And that's where we are too many times.
we're there and that does exist. But I think collectively, especially with us collectively, because we understand the problem, we see the problem, and we all have, our perspectives on it and our, our common knowledge and lived experiences. I think we can come up with a strategy. And I really do. I think we can come up with a strategy and some
Absolutely.
points that we can take back to these individual entities that we deal with and start trying to push them and cultivate people. You understand what I'm saying? And I'm
Absolutely.
also saying too on a local level. I know at a national level they compromise at a lot of different places, but I think locally, in our local churches and local civic responsibilities that we have and other extracurricular, we can start pushing some of these issues with them to start enlightening them and moving them in that direction. I just feel like that's our responsibility. We can't just sit. We can't continue to just sit back here and just watch this happen.
And it has to be a long range plan. It's not
It
going
has to be.
be
It has to be.
so you might as well make the loftiest goals that you can come up with because it's going to take a long time to get there. Why not?
It took a long time for us to get here.
So,
Right.
fine.
And Larry, I think you need to be prepared to be Sisyphus.
Yeah, absolutely.
Prepared to be what? I missed that.
You need to be prepared to be Sisyphus.
I mean,
You're
that's where we are anyway. I mean, we're pushing the ball up the hill no matter what.
Right,
and it's gonna roll back down.
And it's going
Right.
to roll back down, and you have to push it back up.
You got to push it back up.
That
Right,
is it. That is it.
right.
Well, listen, I want to thank you all for your time, and we've got. I think this was the perfect show, coming back from the aftermath. Actually, I won't even say, castigate the election. I mean, it was just really
Coming back off looking at the tape.
looking at the tape. That's it, man. I mean, it's just an assessment of where we are, and there's a pre-test, a post-test, and then there's a curriculum to follow.
Exactly.
So we can pick up all of those weaknesses, make our weaknesses stronger, and exploit our strengths as well. Anything
Right.
you all need to add before we close out?
No, that's why we will.
No.
That's why we watched the film.
That's
Right.
that's it. Well, thank you all for
All
tuning.
hope is not lost.
It is not. We are in a good position, and I think that we'll get where we need to go. Nothing happens out of chance. And one thing I hope is that the leadership that we saw from Vice President Harris is not quieted, and that she doubled down on what she did, because she did a phenomenal job. We can't blame her for anything, and her leadership is spectacular. And if there's a time that our community needs it, it's now. And I hope that she gets out and we see her in a influential role.
I do too. I hope she doubles down and doubles down in our community, doubles down with us. I hope she doubles down with us. I really do.
I do
Because
too.
like Mike said, you have to forfeit your blackness to be the president. She didn't become the president, but this is an opportunity for her to come back and double down with us and help us get some of this stuff straight.
And help herself, because she's
And help herself, exactly.
too. Well, thank you all for tuning in to the Level Set, and we look forward to being in community with you all very soon.